So we're delighted that everybody is here today, and I'm going to be introducing the topic at hand. It's a pleasure to see all of you enjoying lunch and enjoying conversations. So for many millions of people around the world, the last 4 months have been very painful. Of course, for the Palestinian people, there are no words. But for millions of others, as we saw with the terrible sacrifice last week of U.S. Airman Aaron Bushnell, this has been a wrenching time emotionally and psychologically. And all of this comes on top of what we routinely call existential crisis, a word that has become widespread in recent years to describe the potential end of human civilization due to war, climate change, extreme wealth polarization, the threat of fascism. And the question that is on the minds of millions of people around the world is this necessary? I heard a relevant fact to today's discussion on YouTube recently by Trevor Noah. He's the former host of The Daily Show, and he was born and raised in apartheid South Africa. Noah said that during the apartheid regime, the gap in wealth between white South Africans and black South Africans was actually smaller than the gap in wealth between today's white Americans and Afro-Americans. That fact startled me because a lot of people identify apartheid South Africa as the symbol of racism and oppression, and their gap in wealth was smaller than what we have in the United States today. Is this system, however you wish to describe it, some call it capitalism and imperialism, which dominates our world, is this an expression of an unchangeable human nature? Or is there another explanation? Or in other words, is another world, a more just world, possible? Today, we have a chance to hear from 4 organizations that are grappling with that question. More than that, they are engaged in intense efforts to bring about social change, including, as we will hear, a radical transformation of society. They will describe what they mean by that. They will describe how they see bringing about these changes and the kind of society they envision emerging from the changes they seek. This is a very timely conversation which we hope will be a springboard to more such discussions. Today, we are not having a debate. This is a presentation of views and an opportunity for all of us to become more acquainted with the views and work of the various groups, and to engage with, agree or disagree, the views they will be presenting. All of these organizations represented here have been at work for a long time, in some cases many decades, and we fully expect that there will be some disagreements, perhaps between audience members and the groups represented. But we ask that all the participants in this room express their differences respectfully. Each of the 4 representatives will have 15 minutes to make their presentations. We ask that you withhold all questions or comments until all have spoken. There are cards and pens available for you to write down questions or comments as they occur to you. Once all presentations are completed, you'll have a chance for your questions or comments to be heard. You may direct your questions or comments to a particular group or to the presenters as a whole. We prefer to take the questions from written cards, but we'll provide a chance for oral comments depending on time. We thank all of the representatives of organizations who came here to speak to us. There are tables around the room with information from organizations Socialist Organizer, Revolutionary Communist Party, Freedom Socialist Party, and United Front Committee for a Labor Party. Please take advantage of that and visit those tables. We at this congregation have drafted a protocol to make sure that all of us get the best experience out of such presentations. The intention of today's presentation is to hear about issues facing our world today. We want this discussed in an atmosphere of dignity and respect for all participants. Therefore, here are our expectations for the conversation. Please do not use language which may be interpreted as demeaning to the presenters, the audience, or any social group. Do participate by raising your hand to be recognized and identify yourself by name, or we are going to have cards available for all people to write a brief question and or state your opinion on this subject. Please listen to and respect other points of view. Once you have spoken, please let others have a chance to speak, and if there is time, you may be called upon to speak again. If any problems occur during this presentation, we will pause all discussion and determine the next steps. So we hope all agree to these expectations and set out in our society's covenants. With that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. It is Millie Phillips from Socialist Organizer. After Millie, we will have Barry Thornton from RevCom, or the Revolutionary Communist Party. Then we will hear from Sarah Gold from the Freedom Socialist Party. And then finally, Steve Zeltzer from the United Front Committee for a Labor Party. And with that, Millie Phillips, do you want to be seated there, or do you want to come up to the lectern? It's your choice. Please come on up.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you. First a little introduction. Many of you know me primarily as one of the community ministers serving this church. And if you've heard me do a service here, you get that I'm anti-capitalist and in favor of developing alternatives to our current political system, such as creating a labor-based political party. What you might not know is that I have been an active socialist for 50 years, starting with joining a group called the Young Socialist Alliance in 1974 while attending college in Arizona. Later, I joined the Socialist Workers' Party, SWP, a group in what is called the Trotskyist wing of the Marxist left, which had some 2,400 members in the 1970s, unlike today. But I had a serious falling out with that organization, which has continued to degenerate into a small group that in some ways has even adopted right-wing positions. Much later, I joined Socialist Organizer, SO, a group founded by some other ex-members of the SWP. I've only been engaged in UU for half that time, joining partly because I needed some balance in my life to cope with the stresses of being a socialist and a labor union activist at a time when views like mine were much more controversial than they are today. I should add that SO is not a political party, nor does it strive to become one in its present form. Frankly, it's a very small, though multiracial and multi-generational group of like-minded individuals spread across the country who produce a newsletter and website, hold forums and study groups, and participate in social justice movements, primarily as influencers within the organized labor movement and the immigration rights struggle, and long engaged with the Palestinian struggle. We are the US affiliate of a much larger international left current called the Organizing Committee for the Reconstruction of the Fourth International, a mouthful, OCRFI, with groups in at least 40 countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Europe. Of course, SO is not interested in remaining a small group forever, so if what I have to say appeals to you, please sign up on our mailing list in the back and subscribe to our newsletter, and we'd love to have further conversations with you about membership. It's especially important to me that SO does grow in both numbers and influence at this point in time, because we have entered a window of opportunity to build the anti-capitalist movement, unprecedented in my experience. The last major opportunity occurred in the 1960s, when I was a bit too young to engage fully, but the crises then, though deep, were not as deep as they are today. We have this window for several reasons. First, as socialist currents have been saying all along, capitalism has proven a disaster for most of us. Though it developed an economy and political systems committed to scientific and technological innovation, thus allowing expansion of production and wealth to an extent that a more egalitarian abundance for human life became theoretically possible, this expansion always came at a great cost. Colonialist and imperialist takeover and genocide of indigenous peoples, unsustainable abuse and destruction of natural resources, and the ongoing exploitation of the vast majority of people to grossly enrich a tiny minority, resulting in that minority basically controlling everything, though often with the veneer of supposedly democratic political structures. This control, at home and abroad, is enforced through military power and competition between capitalist governments and against potentially non-capitalist ones has resulted in massively destructive world wars and the development of nuclear weapons that could destroy all of humanity, even by accident. It has become clear that though capitalism still inspires technological development, as a now global system dependent on constant growth, it can no longer expand to new markets and is now limited to destroying the old ones so it can rebuild them. But none of this is new. This has been the truth, at least partially, for the past 100 years. What is new is that we have a hard deadline called climate change. Capitalism has finally led us to a point of no return if we do not change course very soon. At best, we can now only mitigate climate change, not stop or reverse it, and the impacts are already disastrous for billions of people. That's the objective reality I think opens this window. Second, we have the subjective reality that growing numbers of people, especially youth and young adults who will face the worst of this, understand this objective reality and want to do something about it before it's too late to avoid a complete collapse of systems that allow humans to survive. It is clear to them that we can no longer tolerate an economic and political system that has led us to this abyss, and something has to change. Marxists teach that when a society's use of resources is no longer compatible with its governance, that's when revolutions are most likely to occur. But what can we do? We have solutions, both social and technical, to most of our problems. What we lack is not good ideas, but the political power to implement them. The US and many other countries have formally democratic structures, yet recent research documents that what the majority of our population wants has virtually no influence whatsoever on how our elected representatives make decisions for us. For example, over 80% of us want to stop the bombing of Gaza, but our government keeps paying for it anyway, no matter how much we protest. That's why SO, like other socialist groups, is focused on how we get such power. First, a newsflash. We don't get it from either major political party, controlled by the very folks who benefit short-term from capitalism. Now, we understand lesser evil voting. Given an artificial and rigidly enforced lack of political choices, it's only logical that one would vote for the one perceived as the least harmful to one's interests. But to move beyond any perceived need to do that, we need our own political party. Second, we need an enforcement mechanism beyond electoral politics. The labor movement is the only institution that represents and fights for people on the basis of their class. Since working people are the vast majority, we need labor unions, and we need to strengthen them to the extent that labor's potential power is unleashed. For example, if labor decides we need to end a war, it could refuse to manufacture or transport weapons. Or if an outright fascist government begins to exercise further repression of our already minimal rights, unions could call a general strike. Third, we need to be able to resist the inevitably increasing repressive and violent backlash such working class power will inspire. As Frederick Douglass once stated, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will." Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue until they are resisted with either words or blows, or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress, unquote. But It's pretty ridiculous to assume the working class in the US can overthrow a vastly overarmed nuclear power through force of arms, and to attempt such would result in a massive bloodbath. So lastly, we have to win over the ranks of the armed services, so that when the people speak, the orders of our rulers to shut us up will not be obeyed. Admittedly, SO has done almost nothing about the third item, but we are deeply engaged in the first and the second. As active participants in the now defunct Labor Party effort of the 1990s, as well as in the labor movement as a whole, we have learned the lesson that, both morally and pragmatically, labor, while itself internally diverse, has to work on an equal and respectful basis with organizations representing oppressed and marginalized groups in their own right, if we want to build political power. In keeping with that, we helped found the Labor and Community for an Independent Party, LSIP, a national network of Black, Latinx, union, and other groups and activists who are committed to breaking with the Democrats, as well as the Republicans, starting at the local level, where it's most realistic to do so. We are holding an online conference March 24th, and please pick up a flyer with a QR code to register on the table and back. So to summarize, what SO believes needs to be done to address our multiple crises is to, one, build a viable political party that represents working people of all identities, backed by the resources and support of organized labor. Two, continue to work within the unions to democratize and radicalize them, and to support the new and very welcome upsurge of labor militancy currently happening. Three, win over the rank and file of the military to support the struggles of its own class. And a few more. Be great builders of the struggles of all people with marginalized and oppressed identities, favoring both separate and united organizing to ensure mutual respect and accountability. And to educate far and wide, like we're doing here today, about why capitalism is not inevitable, it can no longer be tolerated, and must be replaced by democratic, cooperative, and sustainable forms of economics and governance to ensure that humanity survives and thrives in the future. Thank you.
So I want to thank Millie Phillips for her presentation, and now we are going to hear from Barry Thornton from RevCom. Barry, do you want to come to the lectern up here?
Thanks for inviting me, and we're going to start with this video.
Exploitation, What It Is, How to Put an End to It, by Bob Avakian. In a recent report about revolutionary work in Chicago, one of the people there drawn to the revolution indicated that he did not know what the word exploitation means, because this word exploitation describes something very basic about the system of capitalism that we are now forced to live under, and because many people do not have a clear understanding of this, it is important to explain what is meant by exploitation. In the most general sense, to exploit means to take advantage. More specifically, it can mean taking advantage of, using other people. And in terms of a scientific understanding with regard to the economy, exploitation refers to a situation where one person or a group of people accumulates capitalist wealth that is created by the labor of others. Capitalism is a system in which a relatively small number of people, the capitalists, own and control the major means of production: factories, land, raw materials, machinery and other technology, and so on, and are therefore in a position to force other people who do not own or control means of production to work for them. It is the labor of those exploited by the capitalists, and not the brilliance or entrepreneurial genius of the capitalists, that actually creates the wealth that the capitalists appropriate, take for their own profit and use. Once again, the capitalists are in a position to appropriate wealth that is produced by others whom they exploit, because the capitalists own and control the major means of production. Means of production which themselves were created through the labor of people exploited by capitalists. For example, in a capitalist-owned factory, the machinery that people work on was produced by people in other factories working on raw materials to create that machinery. And those raw materials, in turn, were mined by people also working under conditions of capitalist exploitation. Under the capitalist system, there is always a surplus population, people who are unemployed because they cannot be profitably exploited.
So I just wanted to give that basic picture. This is the foundation. This is the source of all the madness and outrage that people are subjected to here and all over the world. This is the system that it's long past time for it to be swept from the face of the earth. This is the system that's destroying the environment and bringing humanity closer to the brink of nuclear war. War between capitalist imperialist powers, mainly the US, Russia, and China, which have enough weapons to destroy humanity many times over. And also, this is a rare time when the rulers of this country, those who rule over us, are deeply divided in a way that hasn't been true since the Civil War in the 1860s. And the country is being ripped apart, with one section moving towards an outright fascist form of rule, and another section fighting to hold on to the imperialist way that things have been. These divisions can't be resolved within the framework of the normal way this system has operated. They can't hold the country together. And in any case, that normal way is full of all kinds of oppression and the danger of wiping out humanity. For these reasons, and many more, the revolution we're working for is urgently needed and, in this rare time, more possible than has been true for a very long time. Baba Avakian has sharply expressed this reality. We can no longer afford to allow these imperialists to continue to dominate the world and determine the destiny of humanity. And it is a scientific fact that humanity does not have to live this way. There's a whole different way to organize society. A better world is possible. So in short, we're determined to seize on this rare time, to develop the basis to actually make a revolution, to finally defeat the enforcers of this monstrous system. We're determined to abolish this system with all its oppressive institutions. And we're determined to establish a far better system based on the Constitution for a new socialist republic in North America, which is available on the book table back there. That Constitution provides a sweeping vision and a foundation and blueprint for bringing into being a society and ultimately a world free of all forms of slavery, exploitation, and oppression based on class, race, sex, and gender. And we have a method and a strategy to make this real. The approach can be expressed in a single sentence: fight the power and transform the people for revolution. This means involving masses of people to fight the system, to rise up against the continuing crimes of the system, defend people from attacks, including attacks on their rights and lives by racist, women-hating, anti-LGBTQ thugs in and out of government, winning people to the understanding that things don't have to be this way. That this system, it's the system that's the root cause of the suffering that people face, and that system can be changed, and a whole different world is possible. So that's our strategy. What is the world we're working for? Socialism. A whole radically different economic foundation and political system, emancipating relations among people, and an uplifting culture. This is available at our table. I'm drawing from this in its sketch of what key elements of what that socialist system would be about. But the core of it is this: through its institutions, including elections, and in an all-around way, the system provides the means to politically empower the masses of people to carry out the revolutionary transformation of society, to eliminate all these oppressions and the oppression and divisions. So I'm going to just touch on 6 key points of what that system would be able to do. 1, a whole new dimension of freedom and rights for the people. In this Constitution is more than any constitution or founding principles of any society that has proposed or existed. It guarantees not only the protection of dissent, but requires the government to fund its critics. No other constitution provides for that. Point 2, a whole different economy to meet fundamental needs and serve the highest interests of the people. With a new socialist economy, everyone would be guaranteed employment. People would be no longer forced to labor under life-stealing conditions to create wealth for parasites. The technology and other means to create wealth that exist would be converted into the common property of society and utilized by the government in a planned way to meet the needs of the people for a decent life, worthy of human beings materially as well as intellectually and culturally. Point 3, eliminating discrimination, inequality, and oppression in every form. In the new socialist society, eliminating all the oppressive divisions that characterize the old society, including oppression based on nationality, race, sex, gender, would be a fundamental goal and of the highest priority. Point 4, education. Education to actually educate and empower the masses of people. The purpose of the educational system in this new socialist society will be to enable people to pursue the truth wherever it leads, with a spirit of critical thinking and scientific curiosity, not to stifle those things. And in this way, for people to continually learn about the world and be better able to contribute to changing it in accordance with the fundamental interests of humanity. Point 5, healthcare. The purpose of healthcare will be to serve the people and continually develop and apply the science of medicine to meet the medical and health needs of people in society as a whole in a way that is affordable for the masses of people, with the goal of finally making it free. High-quality healthcare available, free for all. And finally, abolishing nuclear weapons, finally abolishing war, and systematically addressing the environmental crisis. The new socialist government will not develop or use nuclear weapons. We'll take concrete steps and wage determined struggle to abolish nuclear weapons everywhere, with the ultimate goal of finally abolishing war among human beings, with the abolition of the system that causes these wars. The new socialist government will move quickly, systematically, and effectively to address the already acute and fast accelerating environmental crisis with the aim of bringing into being a world where humanity can truly be fit caretakers of the planet. So that's a sketch.
Against the injustices and outrages constantly perpetrated by this system, defending people from attacks on their rights and their lives, and waging fierce struggle to break people out of the bullshit ways of thinking and acting that they are caught up in, winning them to become revolutionary emancipators of humanity. And this is what you need to become part of doing now. So this rare opportunity for revolution does not get wasted, thrown away. And instead, there is a real chance to break on through and bring into being a truly emancipating alternative to this terrible world that we are now forced to live in, and the even worse future that looms before us under the domination of this system of capitalism imperialism. Next, I'm going to get right into how we could win, how a revolution involving millions of people could actually defeat and dismantle the institutions that now violently enforce this oppressive system. But I will end this message with this. Especially at a time like this, a time when big things are up in the world, affecting the whole future of humanity, when those big-time exploiters and oppressors who rule over us in this country are bitterly divided among themselves and increasingly unable to hold things together as a unified ruling class, when there is not just an urgent need, but a real possibility to seize on this situation, to overthrow them altogether. If you are not getting with the RevComs, revolutionary communists, who are working every day for this revolution, if you are not part of working to bring about this revolution, then what the hell are you doing?
So that's the part I wanted to play. I would just stress one point, which was in that another part of that clip, that it's really important to confront that we are in a rare time, that things are coming to a head, quite possibly around this upcoming election, and the world is being profoundly changed before our eyes. So the challenge is, what are we going to do? And this is our call. We can seize something out of this madness. Join with us.
I want to thank Barry Thornton for his presentation. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Sarah Gold.
Thank you so much for having me. As I was listening to these two speakers here, and Steve Zeltzer will be next after me, I'm just struck by how much we have in common. That yes, capitalism is on its last legs, it's on its way out, and we definitely need a new system. So I'm going to be talking about my party's vision, socialist feminism, and I hope you'll hear it. So the Freedom Socialist Party is a socialist feminist, internationalist, revolutionary integrationist party. We follow in the footsteps of Marx, Engels, Lenin, Trotsky, Cannon, and Clara Fraser, who you'll soon learn more about. We've been socialist feminists from the beginning. In 1966, Clara Fraser, a lifelong socialist and anti-Zionist Jew, a mother and a unionist, together with Gloria Martin and other members of the Seattle branch of the Socialist Workers' Party, who was mentioned previously, split from the Socialist Workers' Party over the topic of revolutionary integration, the idea that an effective and lasting socialist revolution can only come from leadership of the most oppressed. Whereas SWP chose to focus their efforts on supporting Black nationalism and separatism and orienting the Black struggle towards a capitalist model, like a more liberal model. Revolutionary integration calls for true integration and equality in the socialist movements. A separate but related issue with the SWP was one of sexism. SWP preferred to focus on the white male industrial worker, essentially telling women revolutionaries to wait their turn. I'm going to read a quote from it was written from Clara and some other originators of the party. The leading role of women in the fight for civil rights, in the anti-war movement, in civil liberties campaigns, etc., is not accidental, but results from the special dynamic developed by women as an oppressed sex, seeking liberation for themselves and for all other victims of discrimination. So that's from an article called Why We Left the Socialist Workers' Party, written in 1966. Revolutionary integration is, it's basically the theory that distinguished us from the Socialist Workers' Party. It calls for Black people to be in the lead of the working class struggle and to be true equals with white people and other people of color, as has been the historic trend in the US civil rights movements. The idea is that a true and lasting systemic change can only be brought about by those in the working class who experienced the worst of oppression under capitalism. Under capitalism in the US, the most oppressed are those who have the most to gain from a truly intersectional, in plan and practice, dynamic, powerful working class revolution, those who have the most to gain and least to lose from a true socialist feminist revolution. These people include Black women and other people of color who time and time again have shown their capacity for leadership and movement building. But it's not a simply matter of adding up oppressions and pronouncing someone a leader. You know, we're not going to say, oh, well, this person is 87% oppressed and this person is 95% oppressed. It's about what those oppressions actually bring to the experience of someone when it comes to revolutionary organizing. So as evidenced by US civil rights movements in the 60s, to the uprisings of women in Iran, Argentina, Mexico, and Palestine, we continually find a strong, persistent, dynamic, and unyielding capacity for leadership in women of color. We build and encourage this leadership and discussion within the Comrades of Color Caucus, a joint caucus of members of color from the Freedom Socialist Party and Radical Women, our sister socialist feminist party for all who live as women, as well as non-binary people. Radical Women initiated the National Mobilization for Reproductive Justice a year prior to the downfall of Roe v. Wade. More on that later. We also find this strength of leadership in LGBTQIA+ folks, people with disabilities, indigenous people who are very in touch with the needs of the environment, as well as anyone else who suffers under the intersecting oppressions wrought by the racist, sexist, classist, ableist, environment-destroying, imperialist, warmongering economic system of capitalism. Here's some quotes from Clara. FSP does not make automatic connections about how oppressed you are and your capacity for leadership. In minority women, we found a fantastic degree of not only consciousness, but of militancy and combativeness and organizational ability. We saw minority women rise to the leadership of the civil rights movement and get smashed down, and we saw that they weren't destroyed. They were destroyed as leaders, but never destroyed as individuals and never destroyed as thinkers and strategists of the movement. So I understand destroyed as leaders kind of may seem kind of an ambiguous. What she means there is that in the wider kind of view of society, there's this idea that Black women can't be leaders, and we just don't think that's true. FSP knows that there is a group like Black women where the objective exploitation and oppression meet and come into consonance with a certain degree of combativeness and articulateness, which grows out of their lives' experience that results in leadership material. We have never said that because you were so objectively oppressed that you would automatically rise to leadership. We have said, given a certain degree of exploitation and oppression and a certain experience and sociological conditioning in life, that you will develop the kind of personality that will put you in line for leadership material, and we said this because we observed it. As a revolutionary Trotskyist party, we work to build united fronts to bring the working class together. We also train new political leaders in the model of Clara Fraser, whose shoulders we stand on, and educate and agitate the international working class to catalyze an effective socialist feminist revolution. As our founder, Clara holds a lot of importance for us, but the party didn't end with her. And just as socialism hasn't ended with Marx, Lenin, or Trotsky. Clara collaborated towards, shared, and encouraged leadership development among every member of the party. As socialists, we're confident in the leadership potential of the entire working class. We seek to regroup with other socialist and Trotskyist parties and individuals who haven't given up on a real revolution in our time. To that end, we partner with other socialist organizations internationally in CRIR, the Committee for Revolutionary International Regroupment. Established in 2013, the CRIR is an effort to promote collaboration among revolutionary forces around a common platform that prioritizes the promotion of women's revolutionary leadership in all political struggles. So we've been communicating with some groups in Mexico, Argentina, and Brazil. FSP's victories over the years. So we've participated, and this is just a short list, by the way. We've participated in the United Front Against Fascism, where we organized communities to stop Nazis in the Pacific Northwest. We fought against sexist, racist, homophobic, and anti-radical practices in our workplaces. We fought to establish the right to safe and legal abortion in Washington state prior to Roe v. Wade. And as you know, that's where safe and legal abortion started, was Washington state. We've brought feminism to the left and socialist politics to the feminist movement. Recent and current work in the movements. If you'd like to know more about us, then please visit the table in the back. Talk to my comrade Norma back there. The National Mobilization for Reproductive Justice, Norma knows a lot about this, calls for free contraception, safe legal abortion on demand, an end to medical and environmental racism, affordable childcare, defense of queer and trans families, sexual self-determination for people with disabilities, a guarantee for gender-affirming care, and more. Outspoken participation in the labor movement and our unions, frequent participation in leadership in fighting for self-determination for Ukraine and Palestine. We've worked together with organizations of different tendencies to protest APEC, the recent free trade summit in San Francisco, whose true focus was the freedom to exploit the international working class. And by the way, they forgot to sign the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, and that was because of those protests. Well, they didn't forget, but they didn't get to it. So that's the end of my presentation. If you're interested in more, please visit the table at the back, or you can also visit socialism.com. Thank you.
I want to thank Sarah Gold. And last, we're welcoming Steve Zeltzer. Steve, do you want to come to the dais?
Good. So first of all, I want to thank you for inviting us here, because I think we need more debate, more discussion of different points of view and perspectives. And I think that's important in the working class and among people who call themselves socialists. We need to have a discussion and debate in the working class about ideas, programs, and agenda. That's one of the ways you get clarity. And it's something we need not just here, but we need it in the working class and the unions. Unfortunately, our unions are structured as corporations. Most of the unions are top-down. They don't allow debate and discussion. In fact, in San Francisco, there's been a struggle at the Labor Council to even have a discussion on Palestine. Imagine that. It was outlawed by Liz Schuler, the president of the AFL-CIO, who sent a letter and said you can't even have a discussion on Palestine, and they blocked it. So there's going to be a demonstration at this upcoming Labor Council meeting by people demanding the rights, and delegates want a discussion and debate. And that's part of the problem that we have in this country as far as democracy. If we can't have democracy in our unions, how are we going to have it any other place? That's a real question that we have. So the United Front Committee for Labor Party was established to build a united front of working class organizations and individuals who see the need for a working class party. And unfortunately, we have a political vacuum. Everybody knows about it. In this upcoming election, the candidates that the capitalists are providing are Biden and Trump. Is that a choice for people in this country? No. Obviously not, but that's what faces us. There are some minor party candidates, the Greens and Peace and Freedom, who are on the ballot in California, Cornel West, but there's the working class, the unions primarily, are going to be supporting Biden as a solution to this crisis. What we believe is that we face a struggle for either what's facing us is socialism or fascism, because the decline of U.S. imperialism is actually escalating the kind of adventurism you have in this country of the capitalists, invasions, wars. This country, since the 1889 invasion of the Philippines, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and other countries, has really been an imperial empire. We went to the Philippines with the argument that we had to protect democracy. And Mark Twain actually formed an anti-imperialist league at that time because he said, what right did the United States have to go to other countries to bring democracy? How about having it in our own country? So we have a long history in this country of anti-imperialism, which is hidden from the American working class. And we think that today is a period when this escalation of war is leading to potentially a world war. The decline of U.S. imperialism means that we are becoming more adventurous. We now have a war in Ukraine, which was actually, I would say, organized by the United States, because we went to Ukraine, the AFL-CIO was involved in this, to overturn the government of Ukraine and to provoke Russia, much like we provoked Russia to go in Afghanistan. The United States wanted that. Brzezinski actually in Afghanistan said that that was one of the purposes of the support by the United States of the fundamentalists, and that is to provoke Russia, or at that time the Soviet Union, to invade Afghanistan. So these wars are actually organized and provoked like the Vietnam War and like other wars the United States has. That is the nature of imperialism. And unfortunately, in the United States, in the 40s and 50s, there was a purge. There was an anti-communist witch hunt in the unions. And they purged out leftists and militants, communists who built the unions, who built the CIO. And instead, we have a corporate structure of the unions. We have a trade union bureaucrats who make hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some make $500,000 and $600,000. They do not represent the workers. They're, as Lenin called them, labor lieutenants of capital. That's who they represent. They represent the capitalists. And that's why they're trying to crush debate in the working class. They don't want a discussion and debate about war, imperialism, and the rise of fascism. And we know, as a matter of fact, that this insurrection that was attempted by Trump was coming. In fact, the Vermont AFL-CIO passed a motion that there should be a general strike against any threatened insurrection and coup. They had a debate, and Richard Trumka, who was at that time president of the AFL-CIO, said, you can't have a debate on this. It's illegal. I'm going to put you in trusteeship. And they went ahead and did that. They passed a resolution saying the union should have a general strike against an attempted coup and insurrection. We need, in the working class, to fight for general strikes. That's how workers defend them. In fact, in San Francisco, the establishment of the ILWU took place because of a successful general strike in 1934. There were also successful general strikes in Minneapolis and other countries. But that history is unknown by most working people, and the trade union bureaucracy are terrified of general strikes. They don't want general strikes because in a general strike you see the collective power of the working class. All workers come together, and hundreds of thousands of workers can join unions when there are general strikes. That's why they're afraid of general strikes. We have to have general strikes, and we have to fight for that in the working class in response to union busting attacks in response to repression, in response to war. If you talk about wanting to shut down the wars in the genocide in Palestine, in Gaza, a general strike would do that. A general strike would shut down this war. And we have been organizing to support the idea of a general strike and also to have actions at Travis Air Force Base, which is the largest transfer base of military weapons in Fairfield, California. And we are urging other groups to get involved in that. We had one on July the 24th when there was an international day of action. And there were demonstrations in Italy, in Argentina, in Japan against the imperialist wars. So we have to have international actions that unite the entire working class. Now, the issues that we face, particularly in San Francisco, are critical because it's not enough that the Democrats are in charge who represent the capitalists, but the billionaires really want to get rid of any opposition to their policies. So the billionaires are putting money to get rid of judges. They got rid of Chesa Boudin using millions of dollars. They brought in Brooke Jenkins, who's totally corrupt. And they are seeking to totally privatize and destroy San Francisco. It's already been gentrified. Working people can't afford to live here, as they can in many other cities. Why is that? That's because of capitalism, because the capitalists want to build million-dollar condos rather than working-class housing. So we say there needs to be working-class housing for working people, and you're not going to do that by developers running the cities. Who allows the developers to run the city in San Francisco? It's the Democrats. They privatize, for example, Balboa Park in college, city land, and give it to developers. And they're saying the only way we can have housing is with gentrification, with a lot of million-dollar homes. We're against gentrification. We're for working-class housing. A Labor Party would do that. And they did that in Vienna, Austria. When the Communist and Socialist Party were in charge in 1919, they had a united front. They built 200,000 units of working-class housing, which still exists in Vienna. So it shows it can be done. Working people can do that. We have to do the same in San Francisco and the United States. The other issue in San Francisco, there's likely to be a San Francisco city workers' strike because Breed, who represents the union busters, is attacking the city workers and blaming them for the crisis. They're only offering 2%, and they have takeaway concessions on their conditions and their benefits. And also, they've understaffed the city. They are hiring workers, nonprofit workers, and in business districts to do city work at $17, $18 an hour. You have home care workers who are doing public work, not making living wages. That's in San Francisco. How do you live in San Francisco on $18, $19 an hour? The Democrats are allowing that. Privatization and outsourcing is a part of capitalism. That's how capitalists make profits. So we have to have a fight that if you do public work, you get public pay, equal pay for equal work. And we have to support the city workers who are facing a fight with London Breed and the billionaires. And their rallies, there's going to be a strike preparation for them, and there's a likelihood of a strike. But the union leadership are not taking on the capitalists because they support the Democratic Party. They're not educating workers about the system. It's a system problem. It's not just this bad politician or that bad politician. It's the nature of the Democratic Party and the capitalist system. So that education has to be done by a Labor Party. Now, there was an attempt at a Labor Party led by a guy named Tony Mazzocchi from the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers. And there was a chapter right here in San Francisco. But that Labor Party leadership wanted to use it as a pressure on the Democrats. In fact, they were opposed to people running as Labor Party candidates. How can you say you're for a Labor Party when you're opposed to people running? And the reason that you were opposed is that you would have conflicted with union bureaucrats in San Francisco who did not want a Labor Party. They did not want labor candidates running against Democrats. But that's precisely one of the things that we have to do. We have to run against the capitalist politicians. We have to have labor candidates. We need a united front against imperialist war, and we want to unite with other organizations, working class organizations who are against war. That's why we had this international action on July the 24th. Also, we need a united front against fascism. February, sorry. In February, we had it. This month at Travis Air Force Base, and there will be another that we're going to be having. We also feel that the danger of fascism is real, And our view is that many organizations don't take it seriously. Now, we don't support Trump and we don't support Biden, but we do believe that if Trump takes power, he's going to implement what he says he's going to do. What does that mean? Do people know what that means? That means they're going to terrorize people, that fascist Nazis will be in the streets with guns, and they'll be backed up by the police, that there'll be fascist gangs. Now, I take that very seriously. That means we're facing the danger of fascism, and we have to organize and confront, and particularly we have to organize in the working class, because the working class has the power to fight fascism. They can organize in their workshops and other places. But that means a fight against the trade union bureaucracy, which is against even having a discussion in the labor movement about the rise of fascism. We cannot confront fascism without a debate and struggle and discussion in the labor movement, in the working class, about what fascism is. Because it is a danger, and there's a historic fight against it, which we have to learn about. The other thing is, I want to talk about what's going on in Argentina, because the candidates like Trump are not unique, as a matter of fact. You have right-wing fascistic candidates like Milei, and in Italy you have a fascist in charge. And these candidates, again, are a reflection of the social and economic crisis we face. Now, Milei actually went to the World Economic Organization, and attacked the capitalists. He said he would show the way to fight social democracy and communists. And one of the things that Trump has done is that he called Obama a communist. Do people remember that? Now, Obama is not a communist. He's not a communist. He is a capitalist, openly. But what fascists do is they label social democrats and even capitalists as communists. That's what happened under Hitler. He said that everyone were communists. The communists were taking over. That is a political propaganda tactic used by fascists to confuse people about what capitalism and communism and socialism is. We have to take that seriously, because they are telling people in this country that we have a communist government. We have a communist government. We've got to get rid of the communists. That's what they're saying to people. That is very dangerous. Not that I support Biden, but Biden certainly is not a communist and doesn't have communist policies. But the fact that that propaganda is putting out is very important. So the last thing I want to say is that one of the things is we have to have action that unites the working class. And we're working with Palestinian Journalists Union Syndicate, and they've called for, on Women's Day, this coming Friday, an international day of action to defend the women journalists of Gaza and Palestine. 16 women journalists have been killed in Gaza. And we're having a rally. They've called for a global day of action. We're having a rally at the San Francisco Chronicle at 4 p.m. To support the women journalists of Gaza, the women of Palestine. The conditions of the genocide, of journalists are being killed, their families are being killed and bombed. It's an outrage and it's a war crime. And we need particularly to go after the corporate media, the Chronicle, who have covered this up. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
At this stage, I just do want to thank the technician that works for our congregation, Jonathan Silk. You continue to really help all of us put together wonderful presentations. Thank you for your talents. I also want to thank all four of our speakers, Millie Phillips, Barry Thornton, Sarah Gold, and Steve Zeltzer, for their presentations today. And I'm eager to have questions and comments from the audience. What I think is going to work best is if we operate off of the written note cards. Is there a friendly member here that might be willing? Dolores, are you good at collecting cards? All right. So this gorgeous, wise person is going to collect cards for us for questions and comments. And I'm happy to get started. So we have a question here, which is for all participants. And Millie, can you test out that microphone there to make sure it works?
Hello?
Okay, I heard that. I'm going to invite the questions to the panel here to be as brief as possible. If all four people are invited to speak, to be as brief as possible. The first question is for all the panelists here. What are the concrete next steps from right now?
I mean, our view is we're heading into a political firestorm, and it's crucial to bring forward thousands of people who want to fight for a revolution, for a fundamentally different future. That's how we see the concrete situation and what is urgently needed. So that's a short answer.
You have a very quick answer. What I think is the absolute next step, from my perspective, is a conference I mentioned in my presentation about developing a working class party. I think we all here agree that that's needed, but there definitely are differences around how one goes about organizing one. So welcome to bring those different opinions to that conference, and so we can really have some concrete discussion with the different people in the labor movement and in different people of color communities and other press sectors who are having this conversation based upon lessons we've learned from failed efforts in the past.
Yeah, just off the top of my head, I like the sound of more radical recruitment. We need more socialists. We need more people in the movements, either whether you're in or out of a union. I mean, union membership, I think, even with the mass union drives that have been happening after COVID, we went from, I think, I don't know if these numbers are exact, but I think we went from 9% union membership in this country to now it's at 11. So we can't just say that everyone in a union is going to strike, because that's still only 11% of American workers. So whether you're in or out of a union, we need more strikes, we need more unions, we need more people in established unions, we need more radicalization of unions. We need just more people, more radicals, and more people just willing to give up on capitalism and see that that its days are numbered. We just need more radicals. So please join us.
Steve, do you have thoughts on concrete next steps?
Well, I think that we're fighting in the unions for labor action against the war in Gaza. The ILWU in the past has had strikes or supported actions of community groups stopping cargo. We need to have direct labor action to stop the war. That's how workers can stop the war. The other thing is that military bases, we have to protest at these bases to let people know we have to stop this war drive, not just in Palestine and in Israel, but also in Ukraine and in Asia, the encirclement of China, which the United States wants to do. The other thing, right here in San Francisco, there is city workers are fighting and preparing for a strike. And we have to organize in the community to defend public services and defend public workers and demand that all these workers who are nonprofit be paid public wages. They're not being paid living wages. So they're going to be having rallies. We have to support them. And we have to protest against this, the growing privatization of all our resources, which the Democratic politicians are actually supporting. So those are some concrete things that we can do. And obviously, on Friday, we hope to see you at 4 p.m. at the San Francisco Chronicle to protest the genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza, the journalists. Thank you.
Thank you for your answers. So the next question, do your organizations field candidates in elections? Will a better world come through voting in our current system?
I can say that FSP has run candidates for president and vice president, and I think some local offices in the past, but it's not. It's more of a protest vote. It's more of a. We're not expecting to actually win the office of president, but it's about getting the message out there. Sorry, what was the other part of the question?
Will a better world come from voting in our current system?
No.
Who else has thoughts?
So we, United Front Committee for Labor Party, is in favor of labor candidates. So we want to see a working class candidate for mayor of San Francisco. That would be a positive step that would have a socialist working class program against the billionaires and against privatization. So we're looking for that, and we're working in the unions to develop support for that. And we think that in the unions there's a lot of discontent and anger about the Democrats. The unions have supported these Democrats, and they've basically been betrayed by the Democrats who they supported. So that's, as far as elections, with the rise of fascism, frankly, think about this upcoming election. What's going to happen? Okay? Because you have a lot of people who have been ideologically brainwashed by Trump who believe that we are in a civil war. They already tried an insurrection coup. And if you look at the history of Hitler, you'll find out that he tried a coup too, and the first one was not successful. He didn't give up. Trump is not giving up. The fascists in this country are not giving up, with or without an election. So the idea that an election is going to solve our problem, I think, is illusionary.
You know, as socialist organizer, we ourselves are not, running candidates. We're not a party, but we do work very closely with the network I mentioned called Labor and Community for an Independent Party, and so we do. Our strategy along that line is their strategy, which we've worked out together with other organizations, which is because it's very hard to run people for office under the current electoral system. The Democrats and Republicans make it virtually impossible to run above the local level. We are talking about the need to run candidates at a local level, and also to fight, for reforms in electoral law like proportional representation and ranked choice voting. So we are focused on those kind of elements. We would like to see labor and community candidates running as independents, not necessarily in a political party, but if we had some successful campaigns of those, that we believe that could be the basis for organizing the kind of labor and community-based party that we would like to see. So that's our kind of strategy toward that. As of to the answer to the question of do we think voting is a solution? No, not in this system. Voting is not a solution. But we do have the right to vote, and to exercise that, we have these procedures that helps us get people out there, get our message out, and particularly at a local level, it's not considered unrealistic, and you can on occasion elect people to local office that actually do accomplish something. It is possible. So we think that there's some viability at a very local level, but not above that level at this point. However, people running does, like as you were saying, does bring out, allows us to get our message across. So in that sense, there's some value in voting, but we don't think it alone, since it's so stacked against us, it is going to be a solution in itself.
The RevComs don't run for office, nor do we think voting is an avenue for real change. I just want to pick up on what Steve was saying. This election, in particular, that we're heading into, the presidential election, there's a couple scenarios. One is, he sort of got it. I want to take it a little further. If Trump wins, we should take him seriously. He's going to institute a fascist dictatorship as fast as he can. But if he loses, he has millions of armed followers who will not believe the election was legitimate. And this will pose in itself a profound political crisis. This is why we're focusing on this year as a critical time when the institutions of American democracy are coming apart. Okay, that's the reality.
Barry, I want to thank you very much for your comments. And the next question that we have here says for RevCom, does a revolution mean people taking up arms against the United States Army?
What we think that the U.S. possesses enormous military capacity, and that we can't get to a better society without breaking that power. We also have a strategic approach. We are not talking about taking on that power all at once. That's a long story. I encourage, there's a pamphlet on our table back there. I'm not going to go off into how to do that.
So our panelists have done a great job with brief answers. What I heard was no. Nobody here is being asked to take up arms against the U.S. Army. Thank you for confirming that.
I would say that people have to defend themselves. And if there's a attempt of a fascist regime, people have to organize and defend themselves. So that's, a reality that we're facing. Communities, black and brown communities, have to defend themselves and have defended themselves against fascists who terrorize and try to kill them. That's in the South. That was done by people who organized to defend themselves. And we're going to face more of that in this country because these fascists are armed and organized. And we have to take that seriously.
Steve, I actually just noticed that there is a question here for you, if you would like to ask it.
Okay.
How would the United Front for a Labor Party support people when there is a general strike? Is there a method to help support them?
Well, a general strike, first of all, a general strike has to be organized by the working class, by working people. That's who will organize a general strike. It won't be by a small group saying there should be a general strike. Workers themselves have to self-organize and bring about a general strike. What can we do? We can support the demands of the general strike. The demands of the general strike in San Francisco in 1934 were not revolutionary, by the way. They were for a union hiring hall. That's not, even though the newspapers said it was the Reds taking over, the reality, it was not the case. The workers wanted a union, the right to have a union hiring hall. But I do think that we're going in a period where there may be general strikes because the conditions of working people are intolerable. People can't survive. They have to work 2 and 3 jobs. People can't have housing. I mean, people are being pushed out in the street and then they're being attacked. So these are radical conditions and workers are angry and there has been a rise in strikes. The graduate students, the auto workers, they're workers who are fed up and they want to fight back and they have the power. But these strikes have been isolated. And they need to unite together. Workers have to unite together, and there are many workers who have the same conditions, the same struggles, and they need to unite as a class.
Steve, thanks a lot. It looks like we have a question here for Sarah, for Freedom Socialist Party. A lot of us here are learning. What was the main difference between Trotsky and Stalin? Did Stalin kill Trotsky, and why? I know we've asked for brief responses. Can you keep it under 3 hours?
I'll try. Yeah, we are all learning here. I've only been a socialist for under 4 years. I did used to be a Democrat, unfortunately. Did Stalin kill Trotsky? I wasn't there. But as far as I understand, yes. Well, he, not personally, but as he sent a gardener after him and there was a ice pick. Yeah, I guess because Trotsky was a threat to Stalin's power and there was a letter from Lenin, and I'm not sure why I'm giving a history lesson right now. What was the other part of the question?
So what was the difference between Trotsky and Stalin?
Well, Trotsky wanted an international revolution, and Stalin, as I understand, was content to rest on his laurels and just kind of keep to himself in the USSR and say, let's keep what we have here from my party's perspective.
All right, thank you. This is a question that's general for all the participants. Do any of you think a parliamentary system of representation is better than our current two-party system? I think.
Well, the way it's organized in the United States is a two-party system. So third parties, for example, in the elections upcoming for Senate, it's the top 2, which eliminates third parties. And that was organized by the capitalists, the Democrats and Republicans, to prevent third parties. So we are for proportional representation, and we're against a two-party system. And other parties should have a right to be on the ballot and organize and equally, but that is not the case. And the biggest reason it's not a case is because the capitalists, not only do they control the structure, but the corporate media only focuses on the capitalist candidates. And the latest situation is that people are not having a choice in this upcoming election. In fact, I haven't seen one report in any corporate media of any of the third-party candidates for Senate. There are third-party candidates, no reports on that. So I would say eliminate the capitalist control of elections. And in Japan actually has a more democratic system where all the candidates have so much time on the media, on TV, and that's it. And that would be a more fair operation. But again, as long as the capitalists are in control of the media and they have a structure that they can control, you're not going to have an opportunity to have a fair election.
Steve, thanks. I think Millie had a response here.
We do believe that proportional representation in parliamentary systems are vastly more democratic than a winner-take-all type of system that we have in the United States. As an interim reform, we support ranked choice voting, which allows for independent and third-party candidates to run without doing what the Democrats call the spoiler effect of casting your vote for a third party and therefore possibly contributing to the other party winning, which, there's not a huge difference between them, but as was pointed out, there is some. So yeah, we think that, we don't think the spoiler effect is really that valid. In most cases, you can even prove that the people weren't so-called spoilers, but by eliminating that concern, ranked choice voting allows people to vote their conscience without sacrificing a vote or giving it to someone else. So yeah, we would support that. Again, though, we don't think that electoral politics per se is the solution to problems.
Sarah or Barry, do you want to chime in on that question?
Yeah, I would just say the U.S. electoral system is particularly egregiously suppressing of the will of the majority in a naked way. The Electoral College, all this stuff, these are remnants of slavery and no good. However, we also strongly feel there's many other forms of capitalist rule throughout the world. An extra party, 10 extra parties doesn't solve the underlying problem. The capitalist classes in power has to be overthrown. That's it. Did you want to say?
Our party uses democratic centralism in the model of Lenin. And as far as the parliamentary system, I think we're most focused on getting to a revolution first, and then, figuring out using democracy, using everyone's opinion and voice and vote. We'll figure out what to do from there. I can't speak for the working class all on my own.
So the next question is, the working class term is varied now, many levels. Are tech workers in that class? What about garbage and sanitation labor? What about the police? Do your organizations want to define the working class? Billy, go ahead.
Yeah, as someone who recently went back to college to get a master's degree, and was appalled by what I learned about class in academia, because it was totally not my experience. I have to say that we need to have a definition of class that people can agree upon, and I think the Marxist definition of class, was kind of based upon the working class of Marx's time, which was mostly the industrial workforce. We have exported industrial labor to a large extent to other countries. We're primarily a service sector and technical economy at this point, with some, manufacturing and blue-collar work, construction labor, stuff like that still going on that would be considered traditionally working class. But basically, workers, as was said earlier about exploitation, if your labor is being exploited by a capitalist and you're not getting any say in that, in my opinion, you're a worker. Whether you work in tech or whether you're an underpaid and exploited professional, or you're a blue-collar worker or a service sector worker, or barista, whatever you are, a nurse, whatever job you have, if you're being exploited, you're a worker. And if we were to look at the working class in that way, and not have these consummate arguments about who isn't in the working class, like you can't be in the working class if you have a college degree, according to my college program, by simply getting a college degree takes you out of the working class. That's ridiculous. You're still working for a living. You're not a parasite making money off other things. Even if you're a middle-class professional, you're still working. Why should you be considered, not to be in the working class. So I think we need a broad definition of working class that's based upon whether your labor is exploited or not. And I think that if we had that broad definition, we could unite the working class. And one of the reasons why I'm having trouble doing that is because most of us aren't considered workers by the people who cover in academia and the media.
Well, if you get wages, as most working class people do, and even professionals, then you're a worker. What has been happening in the United States in capitalism is that the middle class is being crushed. They're being squeezed by big companies, and they're being proletarianized, like doctors. Doctors have been work for insurance companies. So you have a proletarianization of the working class and workers. Now, I would say another aspect that hasn't come up in this discussion is the question of artificial intelligence and robotics, because the capitalists are driving to get rid of workers, to make more profit. And that is what's driving this speculative boom in AI. It's not about helping people, it's about making more profit for the capitalists. And according to Goldman Sachs, 350 million workers may lose their jobs. So we as socialists and people who want a labor party are fighting this. We're fighting these robo-taxis, the Waymo and the Cruise, which are dangerous and have been allowed to operate because of the corruption of the California Public Utility Commission and Gavin Newsom, who appoints the California Public Utility Commission and also appoints the head of the Department of Motor Vehicles. Also, there's a struggle of landlines, because AT&T wants to get rid of landlines for more profits. And landlines are needed by people who are disabled, people in rural areas. So this coming Thursday, there's going to be a press conference and rally at the PUC, which is right down the street, 505 Van Ness, at 11 a.m. To demand the removal of the robo-taxis, Waymo, which have been expanded, and also to protect our landlines. So our view is we have to fight against technology for profit, and technology should be for the use of people. But it's not going to be for the use of people as long as it's controlled by the billionaires and the capitalists.
Thank you, Steve. Barry and Sarah, do you want to weigh in who is working class and who is not?
Yeah, just quickly, I can say if you need a job to keep surviving and supporting your family, whether you're a tech worker or a janitor, then you're working class. However, that does not include the police. The police are, the layer of people, of jobs that can, their position, their very carefully dictated position is as a protective force of the capitalists from the working class. That is their position in society, is to protect the ruling class from the working class.
Sarah, I want to thank you for that artful answer that is aligned with the protocols that we have here. And if people want to talk with you more, they can do that one-on-one with you after. Is that correct?
Sure.
Great. Barry, do you want to address that?
I just wanted to say, Leonard made an extremely important point. Especially in imperialist countries, the working class is divided between a section that's more stable, has a relatively higher wages, and a section that's more desperate and more fits Marx's idea, the proletariat with nothing to lose. This is even more true of the US, where there's a desperate section of society that faces bitter oppression. Many of them aren't even employed. Some are at McDonald's and et cetera. Lenin's point, you have to go lower and deeper to organize a force for revolution.
Thank you for your responses. The next question: the social democratic societies in Europe are quite more equitable than the United States. Do you think capitalism, well regulated, is a successful model?
Can I go, Steve? So Marx set out 150 years ago Marx set out 150 years. He wrote a pamphlet that was directed towards, towards a more working class language, he, elegantly proved using, some mathematical examples, and he goes into deeper detail in Capital Volumes 1, 2, and 3. But he proved that, if you're a worker, like some of the money, some of the labor value that you are producing goes into the boss's pocket. So even a kinder, gentler, friendlier capitalism, no matter how more well-regulated, there are people who like to say, oh no, well, the problem isn't capitalism, it's crony capitalism. What the problem is profits. Profits come from exploitation of workers. So even if it's a better capitalism, it's still gonna lead to a point where there's gonna be exploitation, and that exploitation isn't just on workers; it's on the environment. It's on, it does inflict itself on humanity as a whole, on the earth as a whole. So even if it's a quote unquote better form of capitalism, it's not the solution.
Yeah, one of the things about social democracy is the ideology of social democracy is that you can reform capitalism. You can make capitalism better. And the social democracy in Europe came about as a result of workers' organizations. There were mass workers' movements, and the capitalists said, well, we have to make reforms in order to prevent a revolution. In fact, Social Security in this country came about not because of the goodness of the heart of the capitalists, but because there were general strikes and occupations, and the capitalists were afraid of a revolution in this country. So they made reforms. Social democracy in Europe is not a panacea. In fact, social democracy in Europe is being torn apart. In Sweden and other countries, they're taking away benefits. So social democracy is based on a capitalist system. It's not based on democracy, it's based on keeping capitalism. So what we need is a workers' controlled society and a workers' government where it's based on the needs of working people and the poor and the oppressed, and not the capitalists.
Steve, thank you so much. Millie, I think you had some ideas.
Yeah, I agree with what Steve just said. I wanted to add, though, something to that, which is that the social democratic governments you see in Europe, for people of those ethnicities and such, are often relatively better than here. That's true. They may be more likely to have health care, more likely to have parental leave, issues like that, which we certainly support. However, as Steve was saying, those things are being taken away, and they don't necessarily respond to all the people that live there. There's still a great deal of racism in Europe, a great deal of exploitation of immigrants, and who live under horrific conditions and are subject to police brutality. Those societies are only marginally better than here, and are actually facing the very same problems, and those problems are intensifying, and you're seeing fascist movements arising again in Europe as well, because the social democratic parties have not delivered for the working class, and therefore, the fascists can come in and tell the workers that we have an answer because the people you've supported all along do not.
I would just say there's a basic divide in the world between the oppressed countries and the imperialist countries. And these social democratic governments are imperialist governments in Europe, in Germany, England, wherever. And they are no good, and the conditions are slightly better, but the overall international division of labor is horrific. They participate in wars. Anyway, that I won't go on. But it's not an answer for this world in any sense for humanity. So
I appreciate these answers. So I want to make sure that we have more opportunity for the questions that were pointed directly at individuals, perhaps could be made by the individuals directly. So at the end, let's thank Millie Phillips, Barry Thornton, Sarah Gold, and Steve Zeltzer for coming for their presentations today.